Dr. Usman Chohan joins us after a very, very long hiatus in the studios. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us. Usman, I'll come right to the topic. The Asian Development Bank today says that the economic reform agenda that is supported by the 3-year IMF EFF was projected to accelerate growth and ease inflation in our country. In this Asian Development Outlook report for September, the agency says that growth in Pakistan has rebounded to 2.4% in the fiscal year 23-24. It says that the fund's previous short-term 3 billion loan, which concluded successfully in April, helped with economic stability in the country. And the ADB report also says that the deal aims to A, consolidate public finances, B, expand social spending and protection, C, rebuild foreign exchange reserves, D, reduce fiscal risks from state-owned enterprises, and fifth point, improve the business environment to encourage growth led by the private sector. I'd like your comment on these 5 points that the ADB has highlighted.
Yes, thank you for this important question, because when we look at the ADB and we look at the IMF, it's not that they always have the same view or outlook on things. What you see in the September 2024 outlook of the ADB is something more positive actually than what the IMF is saying, and I think that's very heartening. Pakistan is a founding member of the ADB since 1966, and it's worked closely with the ADB. The IMF has been tough on Pakistan, but the ADB, in the language and in the forecast, so in the numbers when you read through it, has been more optimistic. So their projection may move from 2.4 to 2.8% for GDP. And what they're saying in terms of the typical measures taken by Pakistan is that they're favorable and that you should expect stronger growth, and that in terms of the 5 points that you've indicated, there are going to be stronger measures, and that the reform effort being taken by Pakistan is positive. So overall, the tenor of this report is more favorable than what you're hearing from the IMF, and I think that's a good, sobering talk that we should also keep in mind, that there's no need for doom and gloom, that the ADB has merits in its analysis that I think are worth considering.
All right, Man. I'd like to throw many challenges at you that the ADB report points to. It talks about the country's economic outlook that was still susceptible to high downside risks. It talks about external financing requirements. It talks about shortfalls in external inflows, making timely disbursements from multilateral and bilateral partners as crucial. It talks about lapses in policy implementation that could jeopardize the inflows. It talks about elevated political and institutional tensions. It talks about the prospects of social unrest from a steep drop in real incomes as far as structural reforms are concerned. It also talks about geopolitical developments such as higher food and oil prices that could be the main risks as far as stability is concerned. What is your take on all of these risks that the ADB report points towards?
Thank you for this important question. When you do an analysis in the way that the ADB or the IMF does, you are obliged to point to the risk factors in it. That's your responsibility, to give a weighted analysis. But the risks, even though it's a formality in the report, I don't believe they're that big anymore. For example, they're saying that you can have geopolitical risk, but the rest of the world has to deal with that too. They're saying that your reform efforts may be precluded by lack of motivation and stuff, but I see very strong motivation on our side. They say that, for example, inflation can go up, but the trajectory realistically is going down. They're saying that growth might be affected by many things, but growth can be affected positively by many things. If you ask for my predictions, given what is happening right now, I think that inflation will continue to come down. I think that our stock market will continue to rise. I think that the reform effort will continue on its path. I think that we will secure the multilateral credit. And even if there's shortfalls, we'll just go to the markets because global interest rates are falling, global inflation is falling. So even though they highlight risk factors as part of a comprehensive report, there are many positive things that they also mention in the report, and time will tell which side of their report is correct. But my tendency is to veer towards the positive at this stage in the global economy.
All right, let's finish with ADB, and I'll continue my conversation as far as that is concerned before we move to Dr. Niaz. The debt to GDP ratio on a sustainable declining path. This is what the ADB says is the aim of the IMF. It talks about interest payments and that they were expected to remain elevated for the year. It talks about revenue measures and some reductions in interest outlay that will be able to create a necessary fiscal space. It talks about the country making progress, as you yourself talked about, in re-establishing a market-determined exchange rate. It also talks about the role of the State Bank of Pakistan that has maintained an adequately tight monetary policy to meet its medium-term inflation target to 5 to 7%. Then it talks, but it cautions about three things rather: inflationary pressure that was expected to rise due to the impact of fiscal measures in the finance bill. It talks about higher sales tax on some items and energy tariff adjustment that was required to ensure cost recovery in the energy sector. Looking at these precautionary statements that the ADP has put on, how realistic are the observations that the ADP has put in its report?
I think that there is quite a bit of realism, but I think there's more room for optimism on the ADB's side. So the ADB has a specific relationship with Pakistan, and it will continue to build on that relationship. I think that overall the sentiment should be far more positive, and you're seeing signs of that across the economy. The biggest curtailing factor for Pakistan, as it is for many countries, if not all countries, is inflation right now. Inflation has been referred to in modern American narrative as a country buster. It'll literally bust a country open. So inflation has to be the number one priority. Our state bank has begun to lower rates, and it's done so in a cautious manner. If I were Governor State Bank, I would be more aggressive in lowering rates to give the signal that growth is coming and the business community needs that cut. So I would keep in mind what the ADB is highlighting in terms of cautionary things and still point to all of the good things that are happening. There is what goes up must come down, and what goes down must come up. It must come up now. This is the natural business cycle, and I keep my eye not just on domestic considerations but also on the global economy. I'm keeping my ear to the ground for the signals, and the signals are positive that inflation overall in the world is coming down, and this is our time to revamp the economy and move forward.
All right, let's hope and let's see that happening in the coming weeks and months. Usman, our Prime Minister had said some time back that Pakistan needed to embark on a long and difficult journey to prevent knocking on the doors of the IMF again. He said, and I quote, "We need to pursue a long and difficult journey to augment our macroeconomic numbers. We will have to make sacrifices. Now is the time. It is our responsibility to act speedily and work tirelessly. Only then will this be the final IMF program in the country." What measures need to be taken in order for this to be achievable?
There's plenty of stuff on the table for this to happen. I agree with the Prime Minister that there is a long journey, and we should not become lethargic just because the global environment is easing up. Our reforms are for our benefit. Now, you're asking what specific things to tackle. If you look at the structure of our federal budget, which is something we talk about a lot, the domestic banking sector, debt owed to them is one area to focus on big time, especially because they've had a very good time over the last 2 years where they're fine, but the economy wasn't. The other area where I emphasize great focuses on the federal-provincial relationship. The provinces, the bureaucracies are very bloated, and we just transfer from the federation so much at the start with nothing to show for it. I think that this, if you just tackle these two things, before you get into any other line items, because there's plenty down the road, just tackle these two things and you'll already see so much relief domestically. A lot of the things that we have to solve are of our own making. Let's go ahead and solve them. It's just on our side.
Broadening the tax base is one.
True, but expenditure, I think, is a bigger thing than tax base. We talk so much tax, let's focus on the other side of the equation.
The Prime Minister also talks about a need to tighten our belts and serve the public. It is, we need to act in the national interest. If there's any honest mistake, we'll rectify that. What kind of paradigm shift, in your point of view, are we looking at?
You're alluding to a very important point, that there is a paradigm shift in thinking. There is a resolve across the spectrum that the way things have gone for 40 years, it cannot continue the way it is, whether the global economy improves or not. And so this belt tightening is required, and measures are required. This paradigm shift means that we realize that things cannot continue the way they are, certainly not another generation forward. So let's take the tough measures now so that things are easy for the generations to come. This paradigm shift was necessary, and I'm glad it is there.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chohan, to have joined us as well, and to have seen you after such a long time as well. It was a pleasure to, and I hope to see more of you in the coming weeks and months, because there's a lot to be discussed as far as economy is concerned.
you.
Let's